So welcome learners. This lecture is basically on gain from trade, and this is included in module 5. This is unit 3, that is distribution of gain from trade in terms of offer curve, and along with that we will discuss the trade as an engine of growth. If you want to explain what is gain from trade, basically what happened, the distribution of gain from trade as well as the role of international trade in fostering economic growth are central concept in international economics. Now in these lectures basically we will divide it into two parts. The first one is distribution of gain from trade in terms of offer curve. Then we will also try to explain how trade function as an engine of growth. Now, as I have already explained, the available literature explain the distribution of gain and the role of international trade in ensuring economic growth and development. So what we can do through the application of offer curve and the theory of reciprocal demand, economics like John Stuart Mill and David Ricardo have provided framework for understanding the dynamics of trade and the benefit that accrue to trading nations. So we have already discussed regarding David Ricardo in his theory of comparative cost advantage, so I will not explain in detail. Now instead of that, what I will do in this lecture I will try to explain or explore both the distribution of gain from trade in terms of offer curve, which we have already explained in our module 3, and how international trade serves as an engine for economic growth. Now whenever you are trying to explain the distribution of gain from trade in terms of the offer curve, we have to explain regarding John Stuart Mill and his concept of reciprocal demand. That is the demand for one country when there is a change in price of a commodity in another country. Now the John Stuart Mill theory of reciprocal demand, this basically build upon the David Ricardo of comparative advantage, and it basically explain how trade takes place between nations. Now to understand the reciprocal demand, the key to understanding trade flows and the distribution of gain from trade lies in the concept of terms of trade. Now what is terms of trade? The terms of trade is basically the exchange rate between two goods in different countries. So terms of trade, whenever we are talking about terms of trade, which we have already explained in many times in our previous MOOCs, the terms of trade are basically influenced by both the demand for goods and the domestic opportunity cost of producing them. Now what John Stuart Mill did, John Stuart Mill expanded the Ricardo theory by recognizing the role of reciprocal demand in determining the terms of trade. So although we have explained the offer curve in our previous MOOCs, since in this lecture we will try to explain the distribution of gain from trade in terms of offer curve, so I think it is necessary to recall what offer curve is all about. Now, an offer curve, in simple language, an offer curve is a graphical representation of the relationship between the quantity of good that a consumer is willing to offer, or you can say sell, in exchange for certain amount of another good at different prices. So it is primarily used in the context of trade between two countries or in individual consumer choice, where a person decides how much of one good they are willing to trade for another at various price level. So that is why it essentially illustrating its trading possibilities based on these production capabilities and consumer preferences. So basically what happened, if you are talking about offer curve, it is typically depicted as a curved line on a graph where the x-axis, or you can say the horizontal axis, represents the quantity of the export goods and the y-axis represents the quantity of import goods. So that is why we can say the offer curve is a curved line that starts from the point of origin and slopes upward, showing how much quantity of export good offer increases as the quantity of the import goods demanded increases. Now whenever you are talking about offer curve, there is always a equilibrium point. Now what is the equilibrium point? What happens when two countries offer curves are plotted on the same graph? So definitely what will happen then? The intersection points, that means the point at which the offer curve of the two countries intersect, the intersection point represents the equilibrium trade point where the quantity of good each country wants to export matches with the quantity of the other country wants to import at a mutually agreeable price ratio. That is basically the terms of trade. That means the point at which the offer curve of two countries intersect, this is basically known as equilibrium point of the offer curve. Now, whenever you are talking about offer curve, you need to know there are certain factors which basically affect the offer curve. The first and the foremost important factor is the production possibility frontier. So a country's production possibility frontier determines its maximum production capacity and significantly influence the shape of its offer curve, which I think we have already explained in our previous MOOCs. The second one is the consumer preferences. What is consumer preferences? The relative demand for imported goods by consumer in a country affect how much of the export good they are willing to offer in exchange. So along with consumer preferences, another important factor is the relative prices of the two goods in two countries. Now what happens? Changes in the relative prices of goods can shift the offer curve as the country may choose to export more or less of its goods depending on the price ratio. So these are basically the factors affecting the offer curve. There is a production possibility frontier, consumer preferences and relative prices. Now if you see the figure 1, this is basically we are trying to draw a offer curve for country A. For the timing, we are assuming that the country A has a comparative advantage in producing cloth as compared to steel. For example, for the number of labor required for production of cloth in country A is comparatively less as compared to number of labor required for production of steel. So that is why country A is always in an advantageous position if they export cloth in place of steel. Now if you are assuming that there is another country, say country B, which have a comparative advantage in producing steel. So that is why to gain from trade, the both country has to specialize in the production of the particular commodity where they have a comparative advantage or where they can produce a commodity by applying less amount of input. So that is why for the time being, we are for explaining offer curve, we are as shown in figure 1, we are assuming that the country A cloth is an exportable good and steel is a importable goods. Now if you see the figure 1, as the country exchange cloth for steel at different price ratio, that is the first price ratio is OP, the second price ratio is OP1, the third price ratio is OP2 and the fourth price ratio is OP3. Now as the country goes on exchanging cloth for steel, then we will get different intersection point such as R1, R2, R3. So then what we will do to draw the offer curve, we have to draw a curved line and we have to join those points. We should start from the point of origin, that is O, which I have already explained that the offer curve is always start the point of origin and it will touches the intersecting points. So here if you see the diagram in figure 1, the offer curve is the intersection point. If you join all the intersection point along the point of origin, you will get the offer curve for country A. Now this is how we can draw the offer curve. Now to explain in the grain form trade through offer curve, hypothetically we have to assume that there are two commodities produced by two countries. For example, say two commodities produced, say whatever the two commodities X and Y. Now for the time being, we are assuming that let 1 unit of labor in country A can produce 20 units of commodity X and 10 units of commodity Y. That means for producing 20 units of commodity X, we require 1 unit of labor, but for producing 10 units of commodity Y, we again need 1 unit of labor. So obviously country A has an advantage in producing commodity X as compared to commodity Y, because it can produce more amount of commodity X as compared to commodity Y by applying the same amount of labor. Again, 1 unit of labor in country B can produce 8 units of commodity X or 16 units of commodity Y. So therefore the domestic terms of trade, that is exchange ratio, is 2:1 for country A, where X and Y are the quantities of commodities. Now what happened? 1 unit of commodity X in country B will be exchanged for 2 units of Y, because country B has an advantage in producing Y as compared to X, where the price ratio Y is to X is 1:2. Now what John Stuart Mill proposed? John Stuart Mill proposed that reciprocal demand will determine the actual exchange ratio of commodities X and Y. So it is the, according to John Stuart Mill, it is the relative strength and demand elasticity for each country engaged in trade for each other product in terms of those countries' own product. Now what happens if country A demand for commodity Y is less elastic? For a timing we are assuming that, or inelastic. For a timing we are assuming that. Then what will happen? The terms of trade will closer to the domestic price ratio. That is, what is the domestic price ratio for X and Y for country A? Is a 2:1. And if that will happen, that will favor country B and this favor country A. Why it happens? Because country has an inelastic demand for the importable goods. So that is why if the country A has an inelastic demand for the importable goods, in our example it is Y for country A, then the country A will be always in a disfavored position. And as a result, what will happen? Country B will gain more compared to country A. Converse is the case, or conversely, if country A's demand for commodity Y is more elastic and country B's demand for commodity X is less elastic or inelastic, so what will happen then? Then the terms of trade will close to the domestic exchange ratio of countries B. So in that case, as in the converse situation, what happens? Country B has an inelastic demand for commodity X, which is basically produced by country A, then country A will get the terms of trade in favor, gaining more compared to country B. So that is why the terms of trade will, in this case, terms of trade will disfavor country B and gain will be less compared to country A. So thus what we have learned, that how offer curve can constructed for the trading countries, and how the gain from trade is basically depends on the elasticity for importable goods. Now let us analyze, with the help of a diagram. Now you can analyze with the help of a offer curve how gain from trade may be distributed between the two countries when they involve in trade. So in this example also we are assuming that there are two countries which are producing two goods X and Y. So here we are assuming that the OFA be the offer curve for country A and OFB be the offer curve for country B. Now what will happen? To explain the gain from trade by the two countries, we have plotted two offer curve which I have already explained, OFA and OFB. Now if you see the figure 2, commodity X, which is basically produced by country A, is plotted along the horizontal axis, or you can say x-axis, and commodity Y, which is basically produced by country B, is shown on the vertical axis. Now if you see the figure 2, OCR1 and OCR2 are the domestic cost ratio for producing commodities X and Y in countries A and B. Now what will happen? These two rays are the boundaries within which the terms of trade should lie. So terms of trade always lies between two boundaries, which is basically said by OCR1 and OCR2. Now, as shown in figure 2, the offer curve OFA and OFB intersect each other at point E. So as I have already explained, the point of equilibrium is the point where the two offer curve intersect with each other. So that is why the equilibrium terms of trade is the slope of the line. If you see the figure 2, the slope of the line, that is OE. So that is why the cost ratio for country A domestically is, if you see the figure, is ZH unit of Y for OH unit of X. But what will happen at point E, country A gets EH unit of Y in exchange for OH unit of commodity X. So country A gains, if you deduct EH minus ZH equal to EZ units of commodity Y due to trade with country B. Now, on the other hand, the domestic cost ratio for country B is DH unit of Y and OH unit of X as shown in figure 2. But country B import OH unit of commodity X in exchange for EH unit of commodity Y. So thus, due to trade with country A, country B could gain DH minus EH. What we will get? We will get DE units of Y by sacrificing only EH unit of Y instead of DH unit. So what will happen? Both the countries could gain by engaging in trade where the gain depends on respective countries' cost ratio and terms of trade. Now, as we have already explained, the gain from trade with the help of offer curve. Now we will try to explain the next part of our lecture, how trade act as an engine of economic growth. What will happen, basically what happens, beyond the immediate distribution of gain from trade, international trade also play a crucial role in fostering economic growth. So if you read both the classical and neoclassical literature, the classical and neoclassical economists have long argued that trade is an essential driver of economic development. Why? We have already explained in our previous modules that by facilitating specialization, increased productivity, and enabling the exchange of capital and technology, trade contributes to long-term growth of nation. Now, when we try to explain trade as an engine of growth, the first issue we have to explain how trade promote specialization and efficiency, because international trade basically promotes specialization, which ultimately lead to increase in efficiency. So one of the primary ways in which trade promotes economic growth is by encouraging specialization. So according to the theory of comparative advantage as forwarded by David Ricardo, countries should specialize in the production of goods for which they have a lower opportunity cost and trade with other countries to obtain goods that are costly for them to produce domestically. So this specialization allows countries to exploit economics of scale, leading to more efficient production process and lower cost. So as countries specialize, they also improve their productivity. So as a result, specialization leads to a more efficient allocation of resources, and over time this efficiency is amplified as labor division and technological advancements. So that is why the John Stuart Mill also argued that trade contributes to economic development by enhancing the efficiency of production as countries adopt more efficient production method and focus on goods they produce base. So that is why it is always believed that trade always promotes specialization, which ultimately increase efficiency in production. That means the countries which involved in trade, they can produce the commodity where they specialize with less amount of labor and capital. That means they can produce more commodity with less amount of input, and they can export those commodities to other countries, and they can import the commodities in where they don't have any kind of cost advantage. Now, when we try to explain trade as an engine of growth, another issue what we have to include is trade facilitates capital accumulation and technological advancement. Because for investment, we know that we need huge amount of capital accumulation, and for increased efficiency, for increasing the productive capacity, for increasing productive efficiency, we need technological advancement. Without technological advancement, it is not possible for a country to increase production with same amount of inputs, or with the same amount of, you can say, factors of production. So that is why technological advancement is considered to be one of the important factor which increases production and productivity in different sectors. Now, if you see the literature, it basically believes that trade acts as an engine of growth because trade facilitates capital accumulation and technological advancement. So how it leads to capital accumulation and technological advancement, we will explain. So what happened? Basically, international trade allows countries to access capital, goods, machinery, raw materials, and technology that may not be available domestically. It is not possible for any country that they have produced every kind of good, they have all kind of raw materials. So that is why it is only through international trade countries can access the capital goods, some of the capital goods where those goods may not be available in those countries. So similarly, there may be some kind of raw materials which are not available in those countries. So that is why what happened, this influx of capital goods is essential for countries seeking to modernize their industries and improve their infrastructure. So that is why the importation of technological know-how, expertise, or you can say entrepreneurial skill further supports economic development, especially in developing or underdeveloped nations. So as countries import capital goods and modern technologies, they are able to improve their industrial capacity. This is obvious, and this will lead to foster innovation. So this process, known as technology transfers, allows countries to adopt new technology that can improve the efficiency and quality of production. So in this way, trade serves as a media for technological advancement, industrialization, particularly for underdeveloping or developing countries. The third issue to explain how trade acts as an engine of growth is trade stimulates investment and employment. So what happens when countries engage in international trade, or when different countries engage in international trade? It basically encourages investment by creating new opportunities for farm and industries. So ultimately, there is an increased demand for both the goods produced domestically and the goods that need to be imported. So this creates investment opportunities in various sectors, including manufacturing, or you can say agriculture and services. So this expansion of these sectors, manufacturing, agriculture and services, can lead to more job creation and higher wages, particularly in industries that benefit from export. So moreover, the growth of export-oriented industries can lead to a broader industrial base, encouraging further economic growth. So this effect is particularly pronounced again in less developed countries, where trade can lead to the industrialization of previously underdeveloped sectors. Next, how trade act as an engine of growth, we can also explain another dimension, that is trade enhances economic stability and competitiveness. What happens when countries involved in trade contributes, or international trade contribute economic stability of countries by promoting the efficient allocation of resources and fostering competition. So by exposing domestic firms to international competition, trade encourages innovation and drives down prices, benefiting the consumers worldwide and improving overall welfare of countries involved in international trade. Now, international competition, again, what international competition will do, that will eliminate inefficient domestic monopolies and promote the growth of more competitive industries. So this competition helps improve the quality of product and encourages the firm to operate at the lowest possible cost, further boosting the economic productivity. There is another dimension to explain trade as an engine of growth, because it leads to economic stability and it tries to prevent inefficient domestic monopolies. Another issue how trade acts as an engine of growth is trade reduces unemployment and expand market. So it is generally happens that in less developed countries, trade can reduce unemployment by providing access to larger market. So as a result, what happens, by specializing in the production of primary commodities and exporting them, developed countries can expand their market beyond their borders. So this export expansion helps to absorb surplus labor in sectors like agriculture, thereby reducing unemployment and improving the overall standard of living. This is obvious. Again, as developing countries specialize and expand their export, they may also attract foreign direct investment from developed countries, which helps them to generate more employment and foster the growth of industries that cater to export market. The last point which I want to explain regarding trade as an engine of growth is the argument of vent for surplus and the economic development. How it is happen? Trade can also provide an opportunity for developing countries to exploit the vent for surplus effect. So this concept basically refers to the ability of the underdeveloped countries to export excess supplies of primary commodities in exchange for manufactured goods. So by doing so, these countries can access products that are otherwise too expensive to produce domestically, such as advanced machinery, consumer goods. So thus, trade not only help alleviate balance of payment, but also promote industrialization in less developed countries. To explain vent for surplus, we have used the diagram 3, where in the x-axis we represent primary commodities, and in the y-axis we have used we represent manufactured commodities. So primary commodities or exportable goods are plotted along the horizontal axis, and manufactured goods and importables are along with the vertical axis. So if you see the figure 3, AB is the production possibility curve using the if you use the resources fully. So let E be any point below the production possibility curve before trade, when the resources are not utilized fully. So the country produces OX1 units of primary commodities and OM units of manufactured commodities as shown in figure 3. So due to trade, country produces more primary commodities, and point E, now it will shift to point E1 on the production possibility curve. So as a result, due to this shift, country produces OX2 units of primary commodities and excess, what is excess? An excess of X1, X2 units without reducing the production of manufactured commodities. So PP is the terms of trade line tangent to the, if you see the diagram, PP is the terms of trade line tangent to the production possibility curve at E1. So now EE1 and X1, X2 units of EE1 or X1, X2 units of primary commodities are exchanged with E2E units of manufactured commodities, implying that international trade has taken the country to the point E2, a point outside the production possibility curve AB. And there is another argument for how trade acts as an engine of growth, because it creates or it can exploit the van for surplus. Thus, in conclusion, what we can say, the international trade serves as a critical engine of economic growth by enabling specialization, enhancing productivity, fostering technological advancement, and promoting investment. So it helps countries access capital, improve their industrial base, create job opportunities, particularly in developing countries. Furthermore, trade reduces inefficiency in domestic market and encourages competition, benefiting consumers and increasing overall welfare of the nations involved in international trade. So by fostering this dynamics, trade plays an indispensable role in driving long-term economic growth and development for all countries involved. Again, the distribution of gain from trade is directly linked to the terms of trade and reciprocal demand, as demonstrated by John Stuart Mill theory and use of offer curve. So moreover, trade is powerful engine for economic growth, driving specialization, investment, technological progress, and greater efficiency across the globe. So thus, the benefit of international trade extend far beyond the immediate gain of trade itself, offering countries opportunities for sustained development and progress in an interconnected global economy. Thank you.